Okay, it's 2 minutes after 1. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to MHPN's monthly webinar. We are in November right now, and we are going to hear from Melissa Milton-Pond today about the pattern book homes for 21st century Michigan. Before I turn it over to our speaker, I would like to go over some Zoom items. If you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A box as you think of them. All the questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. And the chat box will be used to share links or resources during the webinar. And both the chat box and the Q&A box are located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you don't see them, please wiggle your mouse and they should pop up. And if you have any technical difficulties, please also send them into the Q&A box. If this is your first time attending our webinar, we are the Michigan Historic Preservation Network. We support the sustainability and economic viability of Michigan's historic places through advocacy, education, and direct action. We could not do the work we do without our members or volunteers. So if you are not a member yet, please join us at www.mhpn.org. And if you are seeking AICP continuing education credits, you will need to log in your credits online after this event. I will send this link to the chat in a minute. And if you're seeking AIA credits, you will need to email me your name and AIA number, and I will send my email address to the chat in a minute here too. And our webinar series are supported in part by an award from the Michigan Arts and Culture Council and the National Endowment for the Arts. We want to say a big thank you to our sponsors. And it is my great pleasure today to introduce to you our speaker, Melissa Milton-Pond. Melissa is a longtime friend and supporter of MHPN. She is actually our current board president, and she is a program manager of the Policy Research Labs at the Michigan Municipal League. And I will send Melissa's bio in the chat in a minute here too. And with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Melissa.
Thanks, Shahan. It's good to see everyone today, or at least know that you're in the room. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get us started. All right. Well, as Shahan has told you, this is about this used to be normal pattern book homes for 21st century Michigan. If you're anything like me, you want to search up the goods while somebody's talking about it. So here's some pictures of what you're looking for, and Shahan's going to put it in the chat on how you can go to the main landing page. I also can tell you that we have a limited number of printed copies that if you want, we can send. We have volume 1 and volume 2. I'm also going to be talking about a lot of copyright-free architectural plans that we've been able to put out there into the ether and hope that people will build. Those are all only online, but we do have these printed copies of the manuals available. Let me give you a brief overview of the League first. If you haven't heard about the Michigan Municipal League, don't feel bad. I didn't know much about them before I started working here. We are a statewide nonprofit. We're actually an instrumentality of local government, and we serve 530 cities and villages across the state of Michigan. We were founded in 1899, specifically for the purpose of supporting and coordinating elected and appointed officials on city building and city management. The idea was that we are a network, oftentimes compared maybe favorably to the Michigan Historic Preservation Network, in bringing people together who are doing similar work to help share solutions and provide solidarity and support to one another. My team here at the League, known as the Policy Research Lab, focuses on developing place-based solutions that strengthen Michigan and help our communities thrive. While there is a statewide league in pretty much every state of the United States, not many of them have a team like this. Our CEO, Dan Gilmartin, describes our work with a Venn diagram like you see here on the screen of what we know how to do, what is needed for our members, and where we can receive funding. While we have multiple funding streams, and thank God we have not been subject to any disruptions due to federal cuts, we do try to make sure that we are focusing on where we can utilize our resources the best way possible. So we found that sweet spot here in Michigan and in many different projects that I can reference here today. For example, in partnership with our friends at state agencies such as the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, which houses the State Historic Preservation Office, by the way, as well as several nonprofit partners like the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation, where we're doing a lot of work with them recently in Southeast Michigan to support local economies. When we started the Pattern Book Homes project, though, no one else was doing this in Michigan. In fact, nobody was doing this statewide at all, anywhere. Our work is nationally significant with only a few groups working on this topic elsewhere. And when we started, our goal was not to make people do exactly what we have written about, but to inspire, to challenge, and if people copy us, great, because that is the most sincere form of flattery. So let me talk with you about what drives the work that we have in policy research labs. A lot of it is rooted in placemaking. And while I said I didn't know much about the league before I started working here, I did understand about their placemaking platform. I remember hearing members of the league talk about it, and then I made the connection later on. Oh, wait, that's what they're talking about. That's what they're doing. So placemaking. If you know anything about the Michigan Municipal League, or you do now because you're talking to me, anytime in the past decade or two, you know that this is a very big deal. I came to the league after working in local government in Michigan for over a dozen years. I worked as an architectural historian. That's my master's degree from the University of Kentucky College of Design. Go Cats. I also have experience as a staffer for local historic districts and economic development programs. Many of us who work in this field know that you can't always just do pure preservation, and frankly, you shouldn't. You should be working across sectors and across disciplines to figure out how are we making our places better. During my experience in the first half of my career, through genuine knowledge of my community, I created and managed more than a dozen revenue positive projects and initiatives. A lot of them were CLG grants, guys. That window's open right now. You should go check it out. If you have questions, I'm happy to talk with you. Certified local government grants are fantastic. Anyway, I did a lot of those projects, and they were almost always tied to placemaking and economic development. Every time a new idea or opportunity came up, I reached into my back pocket for themes or angles because I knew that if there were so many stories that we could use, we needed to find the right one that was going to resonate with that funding opportunity or that right place and time. And I can tell you that it will sound familiar to community development veterans here or other people who've done this type of work in this audience, that what I wanted to do, what I pitched first, was never, ever what we ended up doing. Because successful projects take a really long time. And they also, though, are almost always tied to understanding local culture and responding to current needs. Thinking about that shift in our work, crossing disciplines and making connections, is what brought us to think about the nugget of what turned into the Pattern Book Homes project. How are we helping communities thrive? So let me ask you, the previous slide said, what's your favorite place? That was the Grand Traverse Commons. I bet everybody could identify that one. Most people can't tell you what this is because I was part of a space planning committee back about 10 years ago in the city of Ypsilanti. We were trying to activate upper story residential right in the downtown. This is 101 West Michigan Avenue. It's now not like that at all because we all are here because we believe in historic preservation, right? Or maybe we have yet to be converted, but we will be. That's a really good avenue for this work. And that placemaking work and making new homes, either out of buildings that are new or existing, it all has to do with Michigan's past and future. It has a lot to do with it. Right now, you in this webinar are part of writing the future history of your community. You are right now sitting at one point on the spectrum of history in your community. We can talk about the spectrum of preservation all the way from high-level museum quality restoration all the way to deconstruction. Same concept, spectrum of history, the past to the future. Behind you is your backstory. Before you is your own story and your community story. Whether you got here last year or you grew up there, you're still intimately tied to the utilization of existing and future assets. Because right now we are building our future history. So how do we do that? Well, I mentioned some of the partnerships. Good work is never, well, very, 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 very rarely ever done in isolation. One of the projects that I'm really proud of that we have conducted here at the League is what I was brought in to do when I came here in 2017. We created a partnership program with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation for their Redevelopment Ready Communities program. Best practices, good standards, how do you make yourself ready to work with developers, receive new investments, try to fill in the holes of your community. Most of us remember what it was like to live through the recession and how we had that feeling if we just couldn't have nice things. We sure as heck can have nice things, and we can build the kinds of communities that we like. So this was part of the project that we wanted to accomplish in helping people go through those best practices, but then also help maintain that momentum. So we would work with communities that had identified a priority site, like is it a blank spot in your downtown? Is it a vacant historic building? What is it? And we would come in and help people turn around that site. Were we successful 100%? Heck no. Maybe every few projects were, but what we were able to do was help people think creatively about the future they wanted for their community, gain confidence in having that capacity to work on it. And then in the end, maybe we did what we wanted to do at the first, or maybe it created a catalyst for something else to happen. So we're going to have a quiz about demographics in a second, but I wanted you to understand where we were coming from when we came to housing. Because we did a lot of this work that was tied to first floor commercial, upper story residential, or site redevelopment that is only focused on commercial. But then we started to hear from our communities, hey, can you do a housing study for us? We started to do those, and we started to have this inkling all along about 2018 or 2019 that household incomes were dropped or stagnant on average, but demand was in the process of markedly increasing, even pre-COVID, for housing units within affordable or attainable house cost range. And I'm going to explain those terms to you in a few minutes. In our market research spanning from pre-pandemic to now, we saw this huge demand increase. We also saw that while larger single-family homes are right for some, I mean, I'm speaking to you from my 1960 brick ranch, and it's not tiny, but I also have many people living in my house. Not everyone does. So we're looking at how are we serving young adults, smaller middle-aged families, downsizing seniors, all kinds of people who want something that is not just a large single-family house. Those Michigan residents only have limited choices and limited resources to meet those desires. So we saw a gap in housing options, and we were able to create one way to fix it. Going in this direction was also influenced by a series of policy forums that the League held in 2019 and 2020. We finished our last one on Zoom, and when that was pretty novel. We're thinking about the future. The League frequently meets with our members across the state. Our members are the cities and villages of Michigan, who are often hearing from their residents about struggles with securing adequate housing. We realize that we will need many kinds of solutions to meet this tremendous need, and that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. If anything, we've learned from the auto industry, putting all of our eggs in one basket isn't going to help us. We need to diversify. And I'm going to repeat that later, and I'm going to continue to repeat it, because the kinds of people who want to live in homes like these are already in your community. Young adults who have returned to their hometown but cannot afford the big house with the yard. Busy professionals who simply don't want to hassle with yard work. Elders who want to downsize from their big family residences or larger acreage home places. And maybe when they do that, they're going to unlock a segment of the market so that other people can move into those units that are presently occupied, but not necessarily as fully utilized as maybe people want to. It is inviting people to maybe consider other choices, not telling people what to do, but inviting them and saying, we understand that there have been some changes. People you know, maybe even you, fit into these housing stories. So increasing housing choices for Michigan residents, we will see opportunities for households of all types, of all kinds, to have a chance to find the right home for their needs. One of the things that we also did, this is one of my babies, is to create the Michigan Housing Data Portal. I saw that the state of Indiana was doing something like this, a few other states. So we were able to get MISHDA and MEDC, MISHDA being the Michigan State Housing Development Authority, and MEDC, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, to pass the hat and cover the cost to bring in the national firm HR&A Advisors who had built that other site. And I said, hey guys, I can pay you, but you need to make it better because it's Michigan and we want to be better. I instilled a little bit of that football rivalry across the border, and we were able to do that. Now there's other states that are doing things and, it's the arms race, but still, what we've been able to create here is not just a purple map of Michigan. It is a way of pulling down a whole bunch of publicly available demographics, straight from US Census, straight from the home mortgage origination data, some proprietary stuff from Zillow, a whole bunch of different things. And what we're able to do is democratize access to data. What does that mean? It's your community. You should know what's going on. So you can pull down a report for the state of Michigan, great. But also you can pull down a report for the city of St. John's and compare it to Bingham Township. You can pull down Clinton County. You can compare them all. You have the ability to understand with as fresh data as possible what's going on in your community and help that inform some of the choices that are going to be made at the municipal level. So I encourage you to check that out. You can find information like, this is a current snapshot of Sterling Heights. Residents are getting older, and we know that looking further into that report, the number of multifamily housing units is declining. There's a big need. We shared that information with the city of Sterling Heights a couple of years ago, and they're now seeing new increased numbers of multifamily available. So here's a good time to point out that if someone doesn't think that they are impacted by the housing market because they are already seated in a home, just consider what happens when they might need to downsize or welcome a family member back into the area or move for employment or other reasons. I have no problem sharing with you that when I had to move my mama from the middle Georgia all the way up here, she couldn't afford a place because the market prices are so much different, even though she was a homeowner in Georgia. We need to think about how do we allow people to have other choices. There's an infinite number of reasons. You can think of some as well. So I told you there's going to be a pop quiz. Shalon is going to share with us a pop quiz, and there's 4 questions. Please scroll. Let us know what you think. No cheating, but you can probably find all this information at the Michigan Housing Data Portal. All right, we're starting to see some activity. Don't forget to give an answer for all 4 questions, please. I appreciate how Shahan gave us like some pretty tempting options. No real ringers there of an obviously wrong answer that I'm seeing. Thanks for your help for that, Shahan. All right, I think that we're slowing down. All right. Shahan, do you want to help me decipher some of these results here? All right. I'm seeing that 27 of you got the correct answer for the first question about what percentage of Michigan households have children. 27%. 27%. That's it. I'm sorry, I can't hear your shocked voices, but yeah, it's pretty small. For the average household size in Michigan, the majority of you got it right, 2.43 people. We have actually dropped down from 2.5 to 2.43 in the past half decade or so. So that's one of the reasons why, when we look at the need for more housing, back when we felt like we had so much available during the recession because there were so many houses that people unfortunately were unable to hold on to, we felt like there were so many out there. But when we have smaller household sizes, even if our population remains the same or grows a little bit more, which it is, we're just over a little over 10 million people here in Michigan, that means that we're going to need more smaller household residences. What percentage of housing units in Michigan has 3 bedrooms or more? Ooh, this was a tough one, wasn't it? Only about 24% of you guys got this right, 10 out of 41. So pat yourself on the back if you got the correct answer of 65% of Michigan households have 3 bedrooms or more. If you didn't get it right, well, guys, that was a hard question. Finally, the fourth question, what percentage of renters in Michigan spend more than 30% of their income on housing and are considered cost burdened? Now, we can talk about specifics of gross or net before or after taxes. It's just kind of a rule of thumb, and it depends on what lenders are looking at. But I think you all, as a majority, 21% of you guys got it correct. 21 out of 40 got it correct. Half of renters in Michigan are spending more than 30% of their income. Shocking. That's one of the reasons why we're doing this. So, did I just push the wrong button there? I'm going to close that. Okay. Let's move on to what shocked you the most. Well, people are clearly not that surprised about the small household sizes. You clever people. But I think that we're landing on, if you haven't voted, finish it up. I think we're landing on that the most shocking thing is that 65% of Michigan households have homes with more than 3 bedrooms. So yeah, we have a lot of very middle class 3 bedrooms homes, and that's awesome, and there's nothing wrong with that. How do we backfill it with other things? Let's move on. There we go. So I've already said this. You saw it. Every community is facing housing problems. This is the 5-year change in home prices by county, and if you're squinting at the screen, I can just tell you it's bad. Housing prices have gone up on average about 57% in the past 5 years, which means that most of us sitting in our houses probably couldn't afford them right now, particularly taking into consideration interest rates. Adequate housing is not available, and we have this thing called a mismatch. It just doesn't fit, right, with affordability. So let's talk about that. Why is affordability so hard? We've got the housing market blues. And nobody leaves this webinar without singing the blues. You got to understand that it is a big problem that we're trying to fix, and maybe you're experiencing it yourself. So let's break it down. Understanding costs. What is affordable anyway? Affordable, big A, affordable housing programs, particularly those funded by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, use income limits that are set at percentages of the area median income, AMI. They're commonly referred to as bands or income levels, and those include categories anywhere from extremely low income all the way to pretty average middle class, 80 to 120% of the area median income. It's usually determined at the county level, and yes, it is imperfect. It is not perfect, but it is a way to measure. So on average, Michigan, you saw that earlier, affordable housing is really talking more about those 50% of renters who are spending more than 30% of their income on housing, or people trying to get into the housing market, and they're just locked out for a variety of reasons. So for example, there was a new infill project in Carriagetown in Flint, where single family houses were priced at $188,000. they were heavily offset by incentives to fit the needs of the median home price in Flint, median household income in Flint of only $37,000 a year. Crazy. So for comparison, the median home price in Flint for new at the time was a little under $80,000, but the cost of construction was just so killer. And a lot of those houses, as we know as preservationists, needed reinvestment. So let's talk about the 5 L's of housing affordability. And I promise we're going to get into pattern book homes in just a second. So thank you for waiting. You got labor, construction costs, have land, the cost of acquisition. You got laws, that's zoning, and other how do you do it codes. You got loans, you got access to financing and whether or not it will be financeable, whether you meet those income needs. And lumber, the price of lumber has just hugely jumped. Which gets us back to preservationists are like, why don't we use the building that we already have? You're right. There are multiple right answers. I wrote the house hacking policy brief. We released it last fall, and it focuses on adaptive reuse. It focuses on the sustainability of preservation. It focuses on how that is one of the really great ways that we can respond to housing needs. This is a picture of Grandview Marquette. Some of our friends, Shannon Morgan and her team put together this wonderful adaptive reuse a few years ago. And there are several different case studies that are focusing on that. Another area of my work, I'm still focusing on adaptive reuse and looking at it not only in terms of housing response, but also carbon reduction. But that's a different webinar, isn't it? So variety is good. We need new infill, adaptive reuse. We need old home glow-ups. We need single family, duplexes and quads, townhomes, apartments. Diversity is good for so many different things, people and houses. It allows us to free up other parts of the housing portfolio when people get to move, if they so choose, to something else in a different phase of their life. So, why is an architectural historian talking about building new homes? I've made some case already. Like you, I love historic homes, and I told you I'm sitting here in my 1960 brick ranch, which people could say it's historic or not. Mid-century modernists, you're my people. Yeah. We still need more new homes. We can be savvy by adding to the housing stock. But when we look at the many neighborhoods that were built during construction booms just prior to and immediately after World War II, we can see that kit homes were a popular solution. They gave home builders simple templates that could be customized based on each family's needs. Oftentimes, these kit homes included designs for multifamily homes that allowed the owner to live in one unit and use the other one as an investment property or to provide room for multiple generations. The Pattern Homes project adds to the value of the community's overall housing stock by creating new housing units or encouraging people to do so, and by reviving a classic way of layering density into our existing neighborhoods while respecting the historic patterns of development. They will strengthen neighborhoods and increase housing choices. So one of the things that we were careful to do was to clarify, no, unfortunately, we don't have a manufacturing site where we can just churn out new houses. We're doing research on that. But what we can do is say that we're emulating the idea of new infill, especially when we think about it in terms of sensitivity to existing neighborhoods, form, height, lot placement, setback, volume. All of those key elements are to help us create new housing that will fit in with the neighbors without sticking out like a sore thumb, but also not violating the Secretary of the Interior standards by trying to convey a false sense of history. When it was built in 2025 or 2026, you wanted to know that it was built then, but you also wanted to respect the design tradition. So that's what we're going to be talking about in the second half of the webinar. So we released volume 1 of this project in September 2022, and I want to thank again our partners at not only the Michigan Home Builders Association, but also the Michigan State Historic Preservation Office, because we were able to launch it with a joint press conference and support from both sides. And volume 2 came out in fall of 2023. You may remember that Michigan helped lead the nation in housing production by the early turn of the 20th century when our manufacturing prowess scaled up to meet the residential sector. Several mail order companies, everybody knows about Sears, Roebuck and Company. Also, they might have heard about Montgomery Ward, but maybe some of us Michiganders will remember that we had our own Bay City, Michigan-based Aladdin Homes. All of those were in the market. An individual could save up cash to purchase the access finance or to purchase or access financing through a manufacturer for a fully planned and fully instructed home, which would arrive on a rail car ready for construction by the buyer or locally hired skilled tradespeople. Depending on the time period we're talking about here, the 30-year HUD mortgage hadn't even been invented yet. So a lot of this has to do with housing affordability and attainability, right? Because people were trying to control for those labor costs and for the land acquisition. You can see how this factors into the 5 L's of housing. Casually and without fanfare, though, in those catalogs, I researched directly at the Duderstadt Library at the University of Michigan. I thank those wonderful archivists there for letting me look at their pattern book homes archive. Oftentimes you notice there's a modest array of 2-family houses or small apartment fourplexes, which were offered by manufacturers alongside single-family homes. The hook for this project is to change hearts and minds in that way. Houses like these aren't scary. They were popular through Sears, Montgomery Ward, Aladdin Homes. Many houses like this already exist in the neighborhoods we like. I can tell you that we were in the process of ideating this project. My son was going through driver's ed, and I was walking around the old west side of Ann Arbor, right near Almendinger Park, and I'm looking and I'm like, wait a second, that's a duplex. And I'm getting my camera out for a picture you're going to see in a second. And then I look around the corner, it's a fourplex. They're hidden in plain sight. We need to build more. We call this gentle density. And often we forget that a lot of those resources that you'd need to build out if you were doing a new infill and a new greenfield construction, like water, sewer, roads, transit, electricity, broadband, they're already right out front of these vacant lots in our neighborhoods. So, let's see here. Click. Move on to the next slide, Melissa. Here's some great pictures. Maybe you recognize some of these. You probably recognize the one on the far left because that's what Shauham was helping me with publicity about. So you notice that the Charming Tudor Revival plan from the previous, from the front of the webinar today, that's in Berkeley. Here are a few other examples from Detroit. That's a duplex. That's a duplex. That's a duplex. That's Detroit. That's Lansing. People light up when you talk about Sears homes, and oftentimes you don't remember that those were duplexes too. This is our charm offensive. We want to dig deeper into what people really need, which is the ability to build neighborhoods that we already like. Here's a few more examples because you know with this crowd, we love looking at historic things. This is the Gratiot from the Book of 100 Homes in Detroit. This is the Manchester, available in duplex or single family home options, as I saw circled down there. An individual could buy either option, and it would still look like everything else in the neighborhood in its own way. We can drive through some of our favorite neighborhoods and see these things still there. Maybe we live in them. Maybe we have friends who live in them as well. But the thing is, these neighborhoods would be illegal to build today in Michigan communities, many of them. Do you know how we can help make something like this happen again? 2 words: zoning reform. Woo! Yeah, all the nerds rejoice. Otherwise, we're just like, what? Oftentimes, zoning was put into place so that we had separation of uses. We don't want to live right next to a manufacturing site or a place that's dealing with potentially harmful chemicals. But oftentimes, zoning was just copied and pasted. So something that was appropriate for the suburban landscape of Southfield isn't necessarily appropriate for the smaller scale lots of Ferndale, right? So it's adjusting that zoning to say, all right, there are existing neighborhoods out there. How do we help ourselves be able to do something like that? That's a big part of these two books that we wrote. So this one right here, the first volume, has a zoning reform toolkit right in there. It helps you figure out how do you fix that zoning code without unraveling everything in your community. We also provide a lot of technical assistance on that. What's the point? Arm yourself with data and knowledge of what exists to help fight this housing crisis in a way that is meaningful and doesn't just allow for sprawl to occur without thoughtful new infill. We often call this missing middle housing. It's duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, small cottages. Maybe you've heard the term ADU, that's accessory dwelling unit. It's a granny flat. It's somebody has an apartment over a garage, or it's a small house in the backyard. That's where this project seeks to add strength to the market, where it's not presently served. It's enriching the fabric, embroidering upon the landscape with more choices. So with volume 2, we amped it up on the volume, got a little funkier, got a little punnier. You're welcome. I had an awful good time writing this project. Like finally reading the lyrics in detail after blissfully belting out, "Hold me closer, Tony Danza," right? It's "Hold me closer, tiny dancer," right? We've begun to realize that we've had the words wrong all along on some of the zoning in our communities. It's starting to also dawn on buyers and developers who want to work with municipalities to fix this fabric. So here's our challenge. In summary, identify and create models to layer new construction in, evaluate what doesn't work, take precedents from historic and contemporary Michigan residential housing forms, look at those pattern books, and then also say, hey, what's in East Lansing that's working? We brought in our architects from East Lansing and they helped us. I'll tell you about it in just a second. We are reframing public-facing communications. Maybe you've heard of the Yes in My Backyard movement, and it could be very scary to think about a lot of new high-rises. This is also a response to that, because maybe a high-rise is going to be appropriate in some place, but I can sure as heck tell you that this is more appropriate in your downtown adjacent historic neighborhoods. So we also are thinking about exploring policy fixes, and as I've previously stated, fixing the damn zoning. One of the most popular quotes for buildings, I couldn't resist. We shape our buildings and thereafter they shape us. Because we've done this, we've done it before. This is from Defense Homes Design Catalog in 1944. What we see now as historic was at one time brand new. And it takes a tremendous effort to do a good job expanding our housing stock. But we know it can be done, because when we build like this, creating walkable neighborhoods which appeal to many kinds of people, these homes can be used for generations. That's one of the reasons why we can't control what choices people make for materials, but we can encourage them to choose durable, repairable housing choices, mid-grade or so, that can last and be part of the infrastructure of housing in the community. This kind of versatile usefulness, the ability to redeploy the housing stock for several types of households over time, is a key component to resilient communities. So it's worked for generations. I'm going to show you a few more gratuitous photos because we love that. That's the Ann Arbor Old West Side. That was the hidden quadplex that I hadn't realized. Grand Rapids Heritage Hill. That's another duplex from Ann Arbor and another duplex from Ann Arbor. That one up front with the 2-story porch, that's me standing on the sidewalk with the light bulb over my head. This used to be normal. So let's revive that tradition. Let me stop for a second here. Shahan, are there questions before I move into talking about the plans?
I think there are A few, we can probably hold them until the end.
Okay, great. So at this juncture, we were able to receive funding from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. Thanks, guys. And we brought in a pair of architects that we knew from the MHPN community. In fact, Dan Bullman had already begun noodling on some smaller scale single family housing that was inspired by catalogs. I didn't know that until I had a conversation with him at an MHPN event. I'm like, hey, we should talk. So he and his business partner, Amanda Harrell Seaburn of East Arbor Architecture, that's their firm, came in to work with us on developing a pattern book homes guide that offers one of the solutions we'll need for addressing the housing need for small scale housing. Each of these home plans were thoughtfully designed to ensure that they utilize key components that allow them to be visually and functionally compatible with the common housing types found throughout Michigan. Key design features include separate HVAC systems, so easier to separate metering for not only HVAC, but also for electricity and for gas, or if they so choose, all of those different things separated out. Individual washer and dryers and units. I can tell you, having been a young mother without a washer dryer in my home, this would have been amazing. Let's make it better for the people coming behind us. There's also sound buffering and the dignity of private entrances. Many Michigan communities had made infrastructure investments for projected growth that never occurred during the recession. So you have a lot of vacant lots. Either that was left over from unfortunate loss due to blight removal or neighborhoods that were just never built out. So by concentrating this new construction on lots is our goal to see how we can enrich the fabric of those neighborhoods. There we go. So again, reviving the neighborhoods that we already like. This tradition came natural to our conversation. And one of the things that I appreciate about working with people who come from that preservation mindset is that we could just jumpstart the conversation, understanding what are we talking about way further down the line, understanding that we are thinking about something that will honor the Secretary of the Interior standards without trying to convey a false sense of history. We imagine them with traditional proportions inspired by the architecture around us. That tradition that we can see in East Lansing or in a lot of other neighborhoods, but it was right there where their studio was, right in their neighborhood. So we had the first two designs, the Grove and the Linden. Here were some of the first noodlings of sketching with deep overhangs, thin profile horizontal siding, cedar shakes, steep roofs, covered entry. Those are options people can choose. Now, we can't control whether or not they decide to peel that off and put vinyl on it. We hope they won't, but sometimes that may be necessary. But we wanted to start with a good high standard that wasn't custom home, that wasn't luxury, but was solidly middle market, dignified, and durable. And out of these designs came the Linden. It's a charmingly irresistible duplex, just shy of 2,000 square feet with 2 units, each stacked on top of each other. Each unit is 998 square feet. On the first level, it's barrier-free. We have in the plans designed a ramp. There's also alternate elevations so that you can change out a configuration in the kitchen to have a work surface. All of our designs have integrated at the very base level, universal design, except for the upstairs on some of these. All of the first floor levels are able to be used for people who have mobility issues. And if you don't, well, it's no skin off your nose if you have a wider doorway. We wanted to focus on the dignity of occupants and contextual sensitivity. So we have separate entrances for each unit. One faces the street, one faces the side, but it just looks like a side door. Each step of set of entry steps and landing is equal in size and has a covered roof. You'll also see that there's the regional details of deep eaves, pitched roof, etc. Here's the floor plan. 2 bedrooms per unit, barrier-free bathroom, open plan kitchen and living room, and like I said, the hot stuff, in-unit washer and dryer. The furnaces and water heaters are located in each respective unit for easy access, as well as to meet fire safety requirements of separation between the units. Also, to meet fire separation requirements, there's no connection between the main level and second level units. No door connects the units, and the ductwork is completely separated by unit to prevent fire spread. Because, guys, fires are bad. We don't want them. And if we're building to modern standards, we need to make it as safe as possible. So there's a 1 hour wall and floor separation between the units vertically and horizontally. Each unit has direct access to a back porch. And a neat feature of this floor plan is that it's expandable. So if you think about the back of the unit, you can add on more bedrooms easily if a larger unit is desired. And all of this could be done without requiring any changes to the rest of the floor plan. We also provided flexibility in design. These are both the same house. They just have different skin. So for floor plan 1, you have this neo-Tudor revival. Floor plan 2, you have a bid towards the four-square tradition that you see here in Michigan. So check it out. Simply remove that faux rake. I learned the term faux rake. Replace the gable roof with hips, and you get this. A completely different exterior, same floor plan. Isn't that cool? So it's all about flexibility. You can also see that we gave recommendations for different exterior treatments. Cedar shake, horizontal hardy board, stucco. We wanted to incorporate these designs to be flexible as possible. So we thought about it in terms of a theoretical lot, because this can be placed in a lot of different places. Our theoretical lot was 50 feet by 100 foot. And this is based on a longstanding friendship with the city of Kalamazoo that has done a lot of this great work. They've also worked with the city of South Bend, Indiana, and it's helping us figure out an average size lot in an urban area, fitting it on there, and how are you going to see it with different site conditions, with a side-loaded driveway or a front-loaded or an alley access. We thought about how people could see the different scenarios. We also tried to illustrate it, because if you're a literal person and you're talking about something that's theoretical, you need to see the images. You need to think about how you can react to it so that you can feel right about it. Here's the Grove. That's our fourplex. It looks like a giant house. It's 3,666 square feet, which is, guys, this is about the same size as a rather large house out in the suburbs, but it's 4 units stacked. 2 on the main floor, 2 on the second. Each unit is about 900 square feet. There's 1 barrier-free unit located on the main level. You can see that ramp there. And the focus is on how the floorplex fronts the street with contextual sensitivity so that it blends in with single-family homes it will reside along next to. There are 2 entrances in the front and the side, and so 1 to the street access and 1 to the side to the ramp. This is critical regionalism, guys. You definitely think that this will fit into Michigan. It doesn't look like it's trying to be on the Cape Cod or in Palm Springs. It looks like the Midwest. Here's some of the images that we had colorized. Maybe you want to go dark, maybe you want to go blue. I don't know. But you know what? We don't need to regulate paint color. We need to think about how are we building durable things that people can continue to use over time. Here's that floor plan. It's very symmetrical. Again, 2 bedrooms per unit, barrier-free bathroom, in-unit washer dryer. Yay! The ductwork is completely separated. And what we learned in the Grove, because we went beyond 3 units to 4, this one has to be sprinkled for fire safety. So it helped us learn a valuable lesson about how big do you want to go, and how missing middle housing, oftentimes you can do duplexes or triplexes, and then you don't have to have the cost of doing fire suppression. Here's the 2 versions of the Grove. People tend to like the 4-square face on the left, but you can also do something that looks like a Tudor revival on the right. Yep, these are same house, different faces. Here's another vision of those plans for the Abbott. At this point is usually when I have our architects talking and they love to dive into more of the details. If you're an architect in the room, ask questions, and if I don't have an answer for you, I'll get you over to Dan and Amanda. Our focus was to how to develop designs that can be built anywhere in Michigan despite variability of site conditions, snow loads, wind loads, and soils. So with unknown site, variability of site setbacks, and lot size, etc., we decided to develop designs that were implementable on a large scale by leaving out a few details. So that's where we invented the term 95% complete. Is this an interesting industry term? Heck no. But we're trying to communicate to people that they're almost done. And if you work with your local building official, you work with your general contractor, you should be able to build these without too much trouble. It's saving you thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of architectural work. And we were able to structure an agreement with East Arbor so that they understood that their work would be open sourced like this, and they felt confident that this was an important thing for them to do. Another term that we use is substantially complete. So here's another one for the Grove. And all of these are on our website. Xiaohan put that into the chat at the beginning. You can just click through and pull them down. I will note for you that there is currently a court case that's held up right now about the upgrade in Michigan building code. But when we do see that upgrade to 2021 standards, there's a naming problem there. It would be the most current standards. We will be updating these plans to make sure that they are also in compliance with new standards. Here's a few screenshots for the zoning reform toolkit to help you figure out how do you do what's known as a zoning stress test. What if you were to look at the existing zoning in a community and ask yourself, if I were to build this house, would I be able to meet the requirements for setbacks from the lot line? Would I be able to meet the requirements for height or for the size of the building? In many communities, they have a minimum square footage for unit size. You can't build anything smaller than 800 square feet in many places, which is kind of a challenge when you think about some of the smaller stuff that we came out with in volume 2. Here's another view of the fourplex, our Grove, in volume 1. Here's a few more sketches. Here's what we came up with in volume 2. We called it the modular mixtape of options. So many different configurations. The one in the lower left is a ADU that is the same cottage put on top of a garage as the pink one in the upper right. Same floor plan. We turned its orientation and dropped it onto the ground. Those can be configured in what's known as a cottage court. Who here was a fan of the Big Lebowski? Yeah? That's where the dude lived. He lived in a cottage court. Smaller houses all around. He also knew his neighbors, didn't he? The row homes that we see at the bottom right also can be reconfigured into triples, all kinds of different ways. And then the upper left, this version is actually still a duplex, and it's meant to be more of an alley house to put into the back of a lot to squeeze in 2 new units. These also are copyright-free plans. So we have a total of 6 units, 6 housing plan sets that you can use, counting the Abbott A and B, the pink and the teal, as one with different options. We also turned our attention to U.S. Green Building Standards to increase energy efficiency. We talked about the use of structurally insulated panels, SIPs, to increase the speed of construction and reduce the cost of labor. And we also dived a little bit into financing case studies. Fun fact, did you know that you could finance up to 4 units with 1 HUD loan? Now you do. As long as you lived at the site, you can do that. So here's what we were able to create And here is a mock-up of how it would fit right next to existing housing for scale. Now is the time to flip the cassette to the B side of our housing mixtape. Press play, crank it up. Let's rock out to those new housing classics. I've got a little video to show you, and I hope it'll work. Here we go. This is a fly-in to an actual block in East Lansing, right near East Arbor Architects Studio, and it helps us imagine where would this housing fit in. That's a little cottage court there. There's the Grove there on the left. And here comes some alley houses as well. Now we're going to see somebody's garage apartment. It's not so scary, is it? Gently adding into existing neighborhoods we already like. So what if I told you it's not just red pill or blue pill, but there are a lot of different options. And one way is to figure out how do you pre-review the plans with your municipality to say, here, we like these. You guys can choose what you want to build. We're going to work with you to fast track it. That's some of the conversations that we've been having with several different communities across the state, because we know the implementation is not easy. The point is to reduce the weird factor and show people the why, the need, and the how. And if we can reduce the amount of wait time or slowness that could happen with the municipality facing new construction like this, all the better. We're actively working with several places across the state. So our goal is not necessarily to get these exact houses built, although I would be thrilled if someone did do that, because I don't have the resources to build a new house myself right now. But it is to help communities embrace the normalcy of new infill and multifamily housing, and how looking at our historic precedent will help us make good decisions about our future history. So what you can do next is to understand that we are fashioning a new set of rules. The League has released a program proposal called the My Home program, where we are helping support local control as a foundation issue, allowing cities to decide what is their own destiny instead of being told at the state level what they need to do. We provide advice, we provide best practices, trends, create programs like this and others that I've shown you today. And while no community can do it all, we know that making deliberate choices to reduce barriers to housing will help. So there's a series of best practices that we are recommending for people. And the idea is that if we're able to see people do that, we're hoping that we're also going to be able to bring some additional incentive programs to the table. We're actively working with our partners at Michigan Housing Development Authority, as well as Michigan Economic Development Corporation, trying to figure out how do we use those resources as well as other incentives like tax increment financing at the local level to allow people to address the huge costs of new construction, as well as building rehab and adaptive reuse. So this is actually starting to be implemented in some places, particularly with a pattern book. I said something earlier about Kalamazoo. Big hearts going out to Kalamazoo, not just because I went to Western, but because they are really, really doing a great job working with local community nonprofit partners, local developers to see new infill construction. This is straight out of their playbook right there on Rose Street in Kalamazoo. We also have national conversations. Chuck Marone over at Strongtown recently interviewed our CEO, Daniel Martin, had a conversation about this and other things. We continue to have that discussion. In Grand Rapids, we also want to applaud the work that they're doing there, working with Oak Street Design and Driven Design. Cody Newman of Driven Design is an MHPN board member. Together, they've developed plans for 19 lots set aside by the city for new multi-unit housing. And we have others in the works, like Cassopolis, the 100 Homes Project in Jackson, some really innovative work in Dearborn, working with the Yemeni community, doing culturally sensitive new infill construction, also working with East Arbor Design. and many cities that are not ready to have us discuss their plans publicly, but we're helping them. Plenty of examples are popping up out of the state as well. In South Bend, Indiana, and Fayetteville, Arkansas, two of our favorite best practices. Flintlock Labs, look them up. We've also advised the Greater Ohio Policy Center. So back to that football rivalry, y'all, we're helping Ohio, but they sure as heck better remember that it was us who advised them. So what's next? Good projects. They take a really long time, and oftentimes they are not what you thought they were going to be. But in the end, it works. And when it works, you need to celebrate it. So let's continue our focus on how we're meeting the needs of our shifting Michigan population and how we wish to shape our future history. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. This is great information. And I know that we are about out of time, but we will try to answer some questions in Q&A. And just a reminder to everybody, if you have to leave, don't feel too bad. This webinar is being recorded, so you can always come back and listen to the Q&A session. And let's move on to our questions. Okay, so first question. Why are these duplexes illegal? Is it because they are not single-family homes?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you for asking that. When you look at area zoning in many of our Michigan communities, they have a designation called R1. R1 is the first or highest form of residential, and it's only single family housing. So if I wanted to build a duplex in my neighborhood today, it wouldn't be allowed. It would be illegal. If I wanted to build an accessory dwelling unit in my backyard, technically it wouldn't be allowed. The City of Ann Arbor, however, has enabled all R1 areas to allow for accessory dwelling units by right, meaning you don't need to get special permission. You just need to go through the regular process of building.
Thank you. Next question, related from Anne. So Anne said, when buying a home recently, the realtor suggested that the single-family home values are lower on the street with duplexes because duplexes are typically not cared for as well as the renters are often more transient. So, do you have any thoughts on how to change this perception?
I think that perhaps we can understand that there has maybe been a period of time where that could have been true, and it could be true for some, but it is not an automatic sentence to be an eyesore or subject to neglect. I think that we need to consider that while many people would like to buy a home and to own a home, it's not the only dignified, okay way to have your home. Many people choose to rent, and we need to have a lot of different choices for people. It also comes into having good relationships with property owners. What are we seeing in terms of neighborhood associations or the municipality working in a positive way to ensure that people are able to maintain the properties that they have? I would not say that just because we are seeing duplexes on the street, that the property value would go down. Each market is so unique and different, but I can tell you that if you're in a walkable downtown adjacent neighborhood, you're probably going to have pretty good property values regardless of who is in your neighborhood, duplexes or not. And if you're able to add them in, well, you're going to be an awful lot like a historic neighborhood that's probably pretty well priced already.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Next question. How do you recommend people working on the zoning issues, both professionally and personally?
I think that a couple of different things. One, the league has worked with the Congress for the New Urbanism to do a zoning reform toolkit that is much more complex than what we were able to put in here. When I was writing this, I worked with my counterpart, Richard Murphy, to summarize a lot of those best practices and put them into a smaller scale. But if you want to learn more about the bigger discussion, you can pull down at cnu.org/Michigan If you can't figure that out, just Google Congress for the New Urbanism, Michigan. And there's going to be a number of case studies for both commercial and residential to help you understand more about zoning. How do you work on it? Well, you inform yourself, and then you also talk to your municipality. It could be that you come to planning commission and you understand more about the conversations that are being had. Or maybe you get on planning commission because oftentimes they're looking for smart people. And then you also just begin to discuss things with your neighbors, because oftentimes you'll find that people aren't against new housing, they just don't want it right next to them. And that is unfortunate, I think, because you're not necessarily bringing a compassion response to the need of people in your community. You're thinking about it in terms of those people, the other people, not our future neighbors. Thinking about it in a gentler, kinder, more pragmatic way to recognize that we have to respond to this need instead of just pushing it off. I think it'll help you do that work.
Mhm. And do you know if there are any Michigan communities that have codified in their zoning policy to use these plans?
There are several communities that are in the process of doing that. We're actually seeing a lot of communities adopting their own pattern book, but they're citing our work, like they're listing it in their master plan or in their other planning documents. So I mentioned the 100 Homes project in Jackson. They have a portfolio of housing choices that people can choose from. There's also the city of Grand Rapids I mentioned, and a number of others that I'd be happy to talk with you about.
Okay. Hey, next question. Do you have a list of contractors to build these homes?
I wish we did. Unfortunately, we don't. Oftentimes, that is the most difficult question that we're working on, contractors as well as developers. So there is a huge shortage of labor in Michigan. I would recommend that you reach out to the Michigan Home Builders Association if you're interested in finding out more on how to court a contractor. But then also just consider asking around in your own community, because oftentimes people are at much smaller scales. They'll do a few projects a year and they get by through word of mouth.
Mhm. Okay, so this question from Kelsey. Did you work with Great Water Homes in Detroit? They've been doing some great infill with pattern homes on Detroit's east side.
I'm familiar with the group and I admire the work that they're doing. We haven't worked directly with them, no.
Okay, so have you worked with any Detroit developers?
I have met with a number of different Detroit developers. The league has met with many Detroit developers. We've also worked closely with the Community Economic Development Association of Michigan, CEDM, for their developer boot camp. And there's a lot of other different places where we see training happening, and we definitely cheer it on.
Okay. Okay, and next question is about the data portal you shared at the beginning of your presentation.
Yeah.
How do you keep that data current?
Great question. We are dependent upon when new data is released. So, for example, even though the federal government is now open again today, well, there's going to be a huge backlog in employment and housing and all kinds of different data. So, whenever that new information is automatically released at a place where you can download that information, if it's a public site or whatnot, we have data scrapers that pull through that information and it updates. So when we have a new tranche of data come, like we knew that there was going to be another update from the census come out this fall, we're going to be updating that as soon as it's available. There's other classes of data though, where you need to collect it and then manually upload it. So we have a maintenance agreement with HRNA advisors who take care of this for us. And it is in close coordination with the Michigan State Housing Development Authority. David Allen is their data wonk over there. He's a great guy. He also knows this backwards and forwards. So the ability to get accurate data is something that we really strove to be able to do. There are different data sets and different kinds of data available depending on the community. Size oftentimes has to do with it. And also the census tracts don't follow municipal lines. So even if you see a little bit of inconsistency, it's as close as we were able to get. And it is reliable. Every single piece of data, every data point is cited from its source. And every single graph or image there, you can download it and then you can put it into your own work, whether it be a report or a PowerPoint. Happy to talk with you more. I'm very, very passionate about this work.
Okay, next question. So how does one get copies of the pattern books? I'm assuming physical copies.
Yeah, we only have a limited amount left because you take these to conferences and they just disappear like candy. If you really want to have a set, reach out to me. Shahan has provided my contact information, and we'd be happy to mail you a copy. You can also pull it down from the website, and it is easily printable.
Okay, next question. Maybe we'll just do a couple of more questions and we'll wrap it up. Question, how do I share this with urban planning classes?
Oh, well, we are frequently available to come speak to urban planning classes. We also can just meet with professors and provide people with that information. I'm happy to make a connection, or if you cite us, just let us know. And we're happy to understand where we're sparking new innovation.
Okay, I guess we'll take one last question. Okay, what are preservation advocates to do when so many historic residences are having 3 bedrooms or more?
Well, I think we need to think about how there are so many larger houses that are in the portfolio of housing in Michigan already. That doesn't make them bad. It means that that's a segment of the market that's out there. We already have built houses that are out there that are larger. Maybe it's occupied by a larger family, or maybe, everybody has their own reasons for why they want to use their space. We're not telling anybody what to do. I certainly wouldn't want anybody to tell me what to do with my home. How do you respond to people's need for smaller housing? Well, there's reversibility that you can talk about in terms of the Secretary of the Interior standards. If there's a treatment that you want to do to partition a house, we talk about it in the house hacking policy brief that I wrote last year. If you partition it, make it in a way so that you can turn it back to the whole original house if that need shifts. There's a lot of other conversation points that we could make. Essentially, it's understanding that because we have so many larger single family homes, that increases the need or the demonstrated point for why we should build smaller multifamily. And if you have a large house that you can partition, do it in a way that's reversible so that if the use changes, that it can be switched back.
Okay, thank you, Melissa, for your time and knowledge, sharing this wonderful presentation with us. And thank you, everyone, for participating. And just a reminder again that this webinar is being recorded. You will receive the link to the recording in a couple of days. And please participate in the survey when this concludes, and this will help us improve our webinar. Our next webinar is yet to be announced. Please follow our website and you will also receive an email when the registration is open. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Melissa, again, and hope you all have a great day. See you
Thanks,
next time.
Jen. Take care.